My guest today is Kori Strobl, a self-leadership and relationship coach who spent 2 decades doing the emotional labor people-pleasing before learning to hold boundaries instead of just setting them. She holds a master's in spiritual psychology, draws on yoga philosophy, and now teaches what recovery from people-pleasing actually looks like. Not the bold and power version, but the messy, real one. You're very welcome. I've already enjoyed our conversation. I always have to remember to hit record, otherwise I just keep talking. So thank you for thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to sit with you. Thank you.
I just wanted to start by taking you back a little bit, just to understand what your formative years like. Almost, do you think the teenage you would recognize the person you are today?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. So, formative years, it's interesting. I actually don't have a lot of childhood memories. It's very mixed up with family lore and photographs. But it actually makes sense to me doing a lot of this work why that might be true. And I'll answer that in a moment. But so in my memories get really vivid and clear when I'm about 13. So it's like I came out of the womb 13 years old. At that stage, I was both trying to be a really good girl and do it right. I remember being terrified of the look of disappointment on my mom's face. Like that was the thing that controlled me and kept me being a good girl. But simultaneously, I was raging and I was angry. And my mom and I had this contentious relationship, and it was hard. And my parents are together, and my dad was there, but he was always on the periphery. Like he was always outside or in the garage, right? He wasn't really in the mix of things, but he was there. And he and I were closer, but we were close because we loved to talk intellectual, academic, spiritual. Like we would be very intellectually connected, but not emotionally connected. And we also connected over our troubles with my mom. And so, there was a bit of that triangulation going on in there. I also was my parents' marriage counselor. So when they were having problems, I would go to her and take care of her and empathize with her, because as much as I loved my dad, I didn't think he was a great husband. I could see that, but I loved him as my dad. And then I would go to him and empathize with him and be like, yeah, she's really tough. And so it's interesting because now I work with couples, and I can see how that early childhood story, that wounding that was completely inappropriate at the time, actually helped me develop a skill set that I use now really well in working with couples, where I work with them both individually and together in the relationship. And both of them feel like I genuinely care about them as individuals. And so when we take that individual work and we bring it into the couples, it's magic. I digress. So back to my childhood, because, I think this is true for so many of us. A lot of times the wounding is also the place where the skill building was happening at the same time, right? So certain capacities were alive in me then as they are now, but, hopefully through a lot of the work I've done have become really refined. And so I think that the teenage me would probably be really grateful that she wasn't still in charge, because she felt like a bit of a mess. And she felt like she had a lot of emotions and nowhere for them to go and no one to hold them. And now I have learned how to hold them for myself and show up for her in a way that no one ever could at the time.
It's funny you say about the memories things. I have very, very few memories before I was about 11. And I always wondered, gosh, does that mean something terrible happened that I just don't remember after I block out? But yeah, and also I think maybe I'm a little bit older than you. I would have look much older, but only a little bit in years. But there just weren't as many photographs around when I was a kid. So when I was a kid growing up, there's probably, I don't know, apart from school photographs, between certainly less than 100 photographs of me before I was a teenager. Whereas now my kids, there's 10,000 photographs of them before they were 10. Literally, the digital cameras, smartphones, whatever, just this folders and folders and folders they would never look at. But of me, I remember this photograph of me on the beach, photograph of me digging in the garden, a photograph of my grandparents. That's sort of it. So that's the memories I have. And I wonder whether, gosh, is there something that happened really bad? I don't think so. Did you have siblings, or was it just you?
I had an older sibling, an older brother. Yeah. And And apparently when we were younger, we were good together. But when we became teenagers, that relationship was also quite difficult. We lived in the same home, but he just about ignored me. Because he didn't understand, he only saw the rageful teenage version of me. And so
Yeah.
he thought I was sort of the problem, the troublemaker. He never saw the sort of
The peacemaker, really.
yeah, he never saw the emotional labor that I was doing the rest of the time. So, I remember my dad called, he was back east dealing with his mother's death, and he called me to tell me he was ready to divorce my mom. And so then I called my brother was away at college at the time. And so I called him to tell him, and he was shocked and devastated, had no idea that they were even having problems because he wasn't attuned to it. And then when all of it went down, they ended up staying together. My mom was really worried about the impact on my brother and how I can't believe you told him, you brought him in on that. He was really upset. I had to really and so now he knows everything's fine. So, but again, it makes sense to me because she didn't see me a different way, right?
Yeah.
It didn't occur to her because of the relationship that had been established. She didn't see me as a young person who lacked capacity because I had more capacity than she had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have a lot of friends growing up, a lot of boyfriends? How was that?
Not really. I was one of the people who like everyone in school, we're talking high school, right? Because I don't remember for that.
Yeah.
um, a lot of people knew me. I was I was basically in with all the little cliques, but I didn't
Mhm.
belong to any of the cliques.
Yep.
And for a long time, I was really sad about that. I felt like I was an outsider. But when I look back on it, the truth is I didn't want to be in any of the cliques. Like there was something funky about all of them that I never really, it was one of those things where I wanted to be wanted and invited, but I didn't really want to go in. Right. And so I didn't understand that when I was younger, though. So I felt very lonely. And I didn't have really any close friends. So there was a lot of loneliness because my parents weren't available. My brother wasn't available, and I didn't really have any close friends. And so it's interesting because then I learned to become very self-reliant, right?
Yep.
Which feeds into people pleasing beautiful, right? Because it's like, I can rely on myself. I don't need you. Don't worry, I can do it. I got it, right? And so it can perpetuate that I think that for a long time, people pleasing looked like a weakness in people, but really there's a lot of people pleasers that are incredibly competent, almost like too
Yeah.
competent, right? And the fact that we do handle so much and struggle really to the vulnerability of needing something from somebody else because we don't even know what that's like, right? We're so used to needing but not being available, and so we've
Mhm.
learned how to make do. We've learned how to get by.
So I was going to ask what your journey was to becoming a relationship coach, but it sort of feels like it pretty much started at 13. And it
Yeah.
almost feels like, a lot of people say in religion they have a vocation. It feels like, I'm not sure,
Yes, like a call.
unless you'd really, really fought against it and said, no, I'm going to become an accountant.
Yeah.
I'm going to become a lawyer. It just sort of feels like you were rehearsing from the age of 13. So how would you describe who you are and what you do today?
Well, it's interesting because I don't just work with couples, because the truth is that a lot of the issues that anyone has is because of their relationship to something, right? So it's a relationship to another person, a relationship to a job, a relationship to themselves, or a belief or an
Yep.
emotion, right? So relationship wise, it's not isolated to a couple. It's really like, how am I relating? And then how is that impacting me? How am I impacting the situation? And really looking for that piece of like, what do I have control over? And acting from an empowered place in terms of that versus what don't I have control over? Because a lot of people, the problem is that they're so busy trying to control the things that they can't control that they are not controlling the things that they should be controlling. Right. It's almost
Mm.
like they're looking for, if I can control this outside stuff, that the inside stuff will be taken care of. And so it's a very outside focused thing. Meanwhile, inwardly, the things that they really could be putting their attention on, like their nervous system, like their perception, like their beliefs, are going unchecked. And so a big part of the work I do as a relationship coach is, how are you relating? How are you relating to life, yourself, and everything around you? And so that obviously feeds really well into relationship work with couples, but it also works beautifully when I'm just talking to individuals. But, you know, in relationship coaching, what I'm really clear of, and this doesn't happen in this couples field a lot. In fact, most of the time it's discouraged for therapists to work with both individuals and the couple at the same time. And there are some people like Dick Schwartz, who does the internal family systems. He's kind of debunking that a little bit. And I do think there's some validity to it, because I don't think that everybody can hold that space. I think it's a unique skill set to be able to hold that space. So it's probably better that it continue to be the sort of line that people don't do that. But for people who have that capacity, it's so beautiful, because a couple, if they're coming to someone to talk about their issues, they often don't have the safety in the relationship to talk about something real, right? In other words, they can't just say the thing and not get a reaction out of their partner. So it's not really safe yet. That's kind of the point of the therapy, right? Or the coaching is to make it safe enough for them to say the thing. So if I just worked with the couple, there'd be a whole bunch of stuff not being said, right? A whole bunch of underlying things going on in each of them that I wouldn't even be privy to. So how can I give the best advice if I don't know what's going on inside of you, right? So the individual sessions are the place where they can spill it all, and they can say all the same things, all the things that feel unsafe to say in the couples. And then I can hold that with them. I can push back and challenge them in a way that they won't feel, if I push back and challenge them in front of their partner, it can feel very vulnerable, because now the partner thinks that they have permission to push back too. And really they're not in that same position. I can hold that, but the partner can't. So there are things that we can accomplish individually that then come together in the couples sessions that makes those conversations so much richer, because I can hold both of their perspectives. And the truth is, when I work with people, I love them both dearly. I'm rooting for both of them. Even I get a lot of people where the woman's like super into it and the guy's just there for the woman. I love those guys too. They ask really great questions. They really want to like understand from an intellectual level, a little bit less so from the heart. And so if I can invite them there in a safe way, like I love my guys who are resistant, right? It's really cool to sit with them. But in the end, like I would say my couples will tell you, both of them feel like I genuinely care about them as individuals as well as about their couplehood. And I don't know if that's a skill set that is available, but I certainly was trained from a very young age to be able to do.
Yeah. How did you get couples, individuals to get past the, I guess if in a relationship, and this is, what do I know? But in a relationship, there's typically one person thinks something, one person thinks something else. There's a victim, there's a villain, there's a natural inclination to want to assign blame for something, even over the same incidents, the man or the woman, or the man and the man, the woman and the woman, however it works, both of them might seek to blame the other person because they've interpreted the situation in a certain way. So how do you sort of almost, and you can't say on sort of day one, right, there's no victims, no villains here, we can't blame each other. How do you sort of get people to, because that's really deep rooted, that we want to feel that we're not the person that's in the wrong.
For sure. I think, certainly the honesty of those conversations happens mostly in the individual sessions. And, the beginning, I just listen. I want to hear their story, even if I'm seeing that it's coming from a victim mentality. And I want to empathize with them, because in that storyline, they are typically hurting. Right? There something's happening that doesn't feel good to them, that they're upset about, that feels unjust or unfair. And so I want to hear the story that they're holding. And that requires me to empathize with that version of the story. And then from there, I start to ask them a little bit about their participation, about, sort of what went on. I ask for a little bit more context, because typically in the victim villain story, it lacks context. It usually just sort of locks into very specific details and doesn't really open up to more of the story. So I start to invite just a little bit of an awareness of like context. What else was going on at the time, right? What else was happening before that thing happened, right? But But ultimately what I end up bringing is, most of the time, it's just that you're different. There's a difference happening here. And usually victim villain is sort of like, well, this is true for me, and they don't believe me. They don't agree with me. They don't, right? And so it's two people trying to be heard in their version of it and insisting their version of it is the correct one. But when I say like, well, so, after we had kind of examined some of the beliefs around it, but if I say it can be both and, in other words, you could have wanted this and it not been available to you. And it's not because they didn't love you. It's because they don't have the skill set. They don't know. There's like, there's a whole bunch of reasons, but it's okay that you wanted something and you didn't get it and that it hurts. Right.
Mhm.
But if you start adding meaning to it and start saying, well, because they're a jerk or because they don't love me, that's when it starts to become problematic. And then we can say, well, this person has this experience and this is true for them. And so you don't have to agree with them, but can we believe them that based on all of their story and all of their experience, that this is true for them? Right. And so like now we're going to come into the room and both of these stories get to be true. Now, what do we do? Because both of them are true and both of them matter equally. So we don't have to get one to matter more than the other. They both matter the same. And at first that can kind of blow everybody's mind because it's sort of like, well, I don't know what to do. We're at a stalemate then. And it's sort of like, well, or we can get really creative, right? If we can believe the other person, then what's something that we can shift or adjust, or again, it can look like something totally new that's never been done before because you believe each other that your truth is true for you. You don't have to change anyone's mind. Oh my God, the pressure comes off when you don't have to change someone's mind. The scary part is that there is such a thing as irreconcilable difference, right? There are differences that they don't match. In fact, they almost like miss each other entirely. And so that can be very terrifying to acknowledge and admit, right? But you could spend your whole life fighting to make these irreconcilable differences reconcilable, right? By trying to get the other person to be one way, the other person to be the other way. What would happen if you just let them be irreconcilable? And I don't know the answer to that because it depends on what the question is as far as what those differences are. Sometimes it just means like, oh, that means this person isn't available for this part of me, right? But it doesn't mean that they can't have all the rest of me, right? They can't, we can enjoy each other in other ways. Or it might mean we can't be together in this capacity because we're just such a mismatch. And the acknowledgement of that it's like no one's to blame now, right? No one's at fault anymore. And now you just have two beautiful, amazing individuals that are just so different and so there's a degree of like surrender and love and grief and sadness that can come from arriving at that place too.
It's really interesting you say that. I was listening to somebody talking the other day on actually a footballer in the UK. And in the interview, I was sort of saying, so you've had a very successful football life. But you've had two failed marriages. And he said, no, wait a minute. So I had one marriage and it lasted for 20 years. We had four amazing boys. We brought them up. They're now four amazing young men. And we decided we didn't want to be with each other anymore. But I wouldn't consider that a failure. The second marriage, I married somebody a bit younger than me. We didn't have children. We had an amazing 8 or 9 years. We decided we didn't want to be together intimate anymore, but we're now still the best of friends. So how are they failures? But we do have this thing that if a relationship ends, it ends in failure, not because 10, 20, 30 years, that's pretty good, really, for goodness sake. But
oh my gosh, yeah.
And I think one of the big issues is that when we buy a car, we might own the car for 5 years, might own the car for 20 years. During those 20 years, we typically get the car serviced, we get it checked, we get it, make sure it's roadworthy, we change the tires, we do lots of things with it. We get into a relationship and we're together 5, 10, 20 years. We often don't talk to each other about the relationship. Sure. And we get sort of 20 years and then somebody knocks on your door and says, hey, this isn't working. You've had 20 years. You've literally not had a check-in with each other for all that time. Sure. Of course, the things you wanted when you got together when you were 25 are different than things you want now you're 45 or 50. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever. You're different people. So
Yeah.
how do you almost get people to almost look back and think that we're not trying to solve the issue you had last weekend. We're trying to just work our way through not the whole 20 years, but it's natural to evolve, it's natural to change, it's natural to have different expectations, whether it be physically or emotionally or whatever. How do you get people to realize that actually there's a lot here we need to unpack?
Well, I mean, it always starts with what's most present at the moment. So I don't
Okay.
try and go digging for things if they're not.
There's enough there already, yes.
Yeah, because usually the present moment brings it all forward. So there was an argument last week that still hasn't been processed. We delve into that one argument, and usually it comes out that one argument obviously has roots in many other things, right?
Yeah.
And so then we use it as a doorway. And so from that doorway, we walk in and we see, oh, well, this thing has been festering for a while. And this is a story you've been telling about him for a long time, or this is something that's been true for you that you've been afraid to say for a long time, right? Because you're right. Different than a car is that we are all changing as, over the course of a relationship. And, I think there's this weird, feeling that if you found the one or there's love there, that somehow the love will just make it all okay and make it just easy, right? It should be easy. And it's sort of like you're constantly having to negotiate these differences all the time, right? And to the degree that you're good at negotiating differences, I think that will help a couple survive, because now you can allow the person to grow into something and stay curious about who they are and who they're becoming instead of feeling threatened by it. But if you're still holding your vision of who you were when you first got together, then one of the members in the couplehood, if they're evolving, all of a sudden that feels like a threat, right? And so then it's treated like a threat, and
Yeah.
now we lose the curiosity. And so sometimes it's really about just getting to a place where we can tell the truth, and then we can stop personalizing it. In other words, it's not about you or about them. It's about the person, right? It's who they're becoming and it's what's happening for them. And so we can, from that place, it's easier to be curious when we're not taking things personally, right? When we take things
Yeah.
personally, God, we're so defended. We're so, right? Like we've got to protect ourselves. We got to make the other person wrong. We have to somehow make that feeling go away. But if it cannot be personal, we can be like, look for information. Give me information about you and who you are.
Yeah. It's that very natural accusatory language, isn't it? So you
Yeah.
never want to go out, you never want to have sex, you never want to see my parents, you never want to go shopping. It's all those things that never is a big word,
Sure.
but it's very much, and then the person feels very tired. But just go back a little way. So from your teenage years, your parents' relationship, your relationship, so you were very much about doing everything right. You were very generous. You were very giving. You were very people pleasing. But that's quite exhausting. So when did you realize that wasn't sustainable? When did you realize that you needed to perhaps change how you were approaching relationships with friends, with lovers, with family?
Well, it's interesting because, I certainly knew I was a people pleaser, and knew it was something I was trying to deal with for a very long time before I
Mhm.
actually got to the place where I could really deal with it. So I could see it. And, I actually delved heavily into spirituality and yoga,
Mhm.
and I didn't realize how much it was feeding my dysfunction. Because it was about personal responsibility. It was about like non-attachment, right? There's a lot of talk around you can't have expectations, non-attachment. And so for me, it was like every time I expected something or needed something from a relationship, I made that expectation or need my ego's problem that I needed to solve. Right. And so
Okay.
then and so it just, that's what people pleasing is, though.
Mm.
People pleasing is saying like the relational field, I can't ask anything of it. So if things are hurting me, I'm hurting myself. So I need to go tend to myself. And so it's okay if the other person can't show up in that way. That's not my problem. My problem is me needing it. It's me wanting it. So I did a lot of that for a very long time. And certainly that was really exhausting. And there was a degree of self-loathing that went on with that, because I saw myself causing, like, again, I just blamed myself for not being able to do it. I couldn't do it by myself. I couldn't do this relational field thing by myself. And why? What's wrong with me? How am I, my ego must be so strong that I keep needing these things out of relationships. And so it took a really long time and a lot of work. But there was a moment where I just woke up and I was in a relationship where the person kept saying, I'm not interested in learning about emotions. I'm not interested in learning relationship skills. That's just not who I am. I'm simple. That's just not me. That's you. That's what you do. Right. And so I'm not interested. Can it just be simple? Right. I just need things to be simple. And, so I was like, God, maybe I'm too deep. Maybe I am. Maybe I do want too much. Maybe I'm expecting way too much. And so I did that dance for a long time. And then I made that person wrong for not wanting the things that I wanted, right? They were wrong. They should, like, things aren't that simple. Come on, you should want this stuff. So it was this dance. And then finally, I remember there was a very clear moment where I just was like, oh my God, they've been telling me. They've been telling me who they are all this time, and I haven't believed them because I haven't wanted to believe them. So I thought, like, they've been saying it, and I thought, well, maybe I could just, or maybe if they just, and in that moment, I just says, oh my God, this is them. And they're not wrong, and they're not bad, and they're not, simple or cold. It's just who they are and who they want to be. And then I was like, wow. And there was like this softening that happened in me. And then I was like, but wait a minute, if it's true for them, it's also true for me. It's true that this is who I am, and this is what I want, and this is what's important to me. That's also true. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not wrong for wanting that, for being this way. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, we're just different. We're just different. And no one's the bad guy, and no one's at fault here. We're just really different. And so it was amazing. That moment just opened up so much for me. And I mean, the love came pouring in, the compassion came pouring in, the grief came pouring in. It was a very big awakening moment for me that happened in a moment, but all the feelings and the recognition took months and months and months to play out.
You need to help me a little bit with that. So I get that, but I mean, there's a big difference between you saying to your partner, I'm really not interested in baseball, or him saying, I'm really not interested in going hiking. Okay,
Yeah.
I understand that they're different. I can go and hike with somebody else. I can go and watch baseball with somebody else, whatever. But if you want to understand emotions and relationships and your partner doesn't, that feels like quite a different thing. So once you realize that we're just different, did part of you think we're too different to be together because I need somebody else that is also interested in emotions, relationships, somatic, all that sort of thing? Or do you think, no, we're different, but I can handle the fact he's not interested in emotions, I'm not interested in baseball?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely was a moment of like, oh, wow, this matters to me. Right.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and, I don't know if I necessarily needed someone who's willing to read the books and do the it's really more of like, are they willing to show up? Right. Are they interested? Is this something they're curious about? Right. Because this is not who I am. That's such a lock in identity where there's no curiosity there. Right. And so, yeah, in that moment in the state of the relationship in that way, yes, it wasn't reconcilable. Right. It's sort of like at that point, the relationship could not continue in the same way, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that was the other part of me is understanding, I was reading all the relationship books, but I was reading them all alone. Right. I was reading them.
Yeah.
I was reading them by myself, and I was reading about things that are about the relational field. They're meant to be reciprocal and two people participating, but I was reading them alone. And almost like, in some ways I thought that I could do the work of both people. That's the people pleasing part. There's a little bit of an arrogance to it. I could do the work of both people, but then there was also a grief, because then all of a sudden I did feel, it was like I felt the aloneness even more acutely, because I would read what was possible, and I would read what could be, or what should be, or what healthy looked like. and it wasn't what I was experiencing, or not only that, it wasn't even what was available to me. And so then it just became more and more upsetting to me. And so, again, I'm very educated in all the relational things, but it didn't mean that I was necessarily experiencing them. And it was because, a relational field takes two people.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? When we go into the bookshop, the big sign above the shelf is self-help. just about self,
Right.
not about couple help, relationship. And yes, there are subgenres and things, but so much of it seems to be about, and that's something I really struggle with, is when books or people make others think they need to be fixed, because being fixed suggests that you're broken, and it's not necessarily somebody's broken. It's just they're in a different place right now. And I think that whole fixing, that whole being broken thing is, I don't think that would help people really.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And actually, that I went down that rabbit hole. I mean, for the longest time with all the self-help, and even spiritually, I felt broken. I felt like something was wrong with me and I needed to fix it.
Yeah.
And that also spilled into my partnership. I thought something was wrong with them and that they need to fix something, right?
Yeah.
But I think, the part of that big aha moment was the ability to stop pathologizing who I was and who they are, and realize that, people are unique, and they come into this life with all their unique ways of doing things. And that's okay. Again, those differences are beautiful and wonderful. And sometimes they're not compatible. And yeah, so this idea of, when I work with people, I'm like, if they use language like fixing or broken when they're talking to themselves, I'm like, oh, no. That, like, everything you're saying to me that you're saying is a dysfunction, it actually makes perfect sense to me why you think and feel that way based on this. So you're not broken. You're working just as planned, just as you were designed to work. Is it working for your life? Is it getting you what you want? Right? Like, maybe not, but you doing it makes perfect sense. So now you can explore and get to say, like, okay, so what do I want for myself? And now you can start to, but it always starts from a place of acceptance.
Teenage sons don't understand how to close a door quietly.
Right.
Anyway, something else you talked about, and it's really interesting. When I read this, I thought, I never really thought of that. You talk about boundaries. A lot of people talk about setting boundaries and creating boundaries, whatever, but you talk about holding boundaries. I never really heard that expression before. I've heard about, we set a boundary,
Right.
but I've never really thought about, well, Anna, how do we hold those boundaries? And how do you find people, when you talk to people about that, how do you find people react to actually, not only setting the boundary, but holding and maintaining that boundary?
Well, this talk around boundary work, it just makes me smile, because I do think it is so misunderstood out in how it's talked about. And so often when I work with clients, like I think about this one client in particular that was just like, God, I keep setting the boundary. I keep saying, don't talk to me like that. And they still talk to me that way. And like, I'm so frustrated. They're disrespecting my boundary. And I'm just like, well, because that wasn't a boundary. Right. Your understanding of boundaries is throwing you off. And so you're running around feeling so disrespected, when it's really, what you had was a request. I mean, anyone who's ever been around children knows you cannot force feed a child, right? You can make a request that says, I'd like you to eat this, but they get to decide if they open their mouth, or if they're making that really crazy, annoying sound. You could be like, could you please stop making that sound? And they may or may not stop making that sound, right? That's a request, because I really don't have control over what you're going to do with it, right? Holding a boundary is really saying, this is me, this is what matters to me, and this is what I need. And so if you continue to talk to me that way, I'm going to leave the room. I'm going to end the conversation, right? So a boundary, the reason why there's something we hold is because it's something that I have control over, right? It's something that I can do something with. If I say something and you have all the control, now you either do or you don't do it. And I'm still just as powerless. And now I'm just so upset because I used my words, but they didn't listen to me. So I don't matter to them. They're disrespecting me. All these conversations are like, no, 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 no. You don't respect yourself. You're not willing to hold the boundary. Right. So you want to like the boundaries we set are things that we have to be willing to follow through with. Now, that being said, I think about like when my kid was little and I would be like, okay, that's it. No TV shows the rest of the day. Right. And that was my boundary. If you did the thing. Right. And then all of a sudden later in the day, I'm frazzled. I'm so exhausted. And all I could use is for them to have 30 minutes of screen time for me to catch my breath. But guess what I've done? I've taken away my outlet. And so I'm in a situation where I'm like, oh no, I either have to let them have the screen time. And now I've gone back on my word. I've, not held my boundary, or I now have to deal with the consequences of having set a boundary that I really wasn't prepared to deal with the consequences of. And so that piece of parenting has also helped me say, okay, I can only set boundaries that I am willing to enforce, right? I can only hold a boundary that I'm willing to do something about. And so the boundaries are about self-respect, not about whether someone else is respecting you.
Do you find that people feel less anxious and maybe more present once they stop trying to manage other people's reactions?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, for sure. But there's a step in between there.
Okay.
So we stop managing, we work to stop managing other people's reactions, but the other person is still having their reactions, right? And so what I am left with is, okay, I'm no longer trying to manage those reactions, but I'm still having an internal experience of discomfort, of wishing this were different, of anxiety about what their reaction means for me, right? Like there's still a lot going on inside of me, even once I've stopped trying to manage other people's reactions. So the next step, the step between not managing other people's reactions and feeling more grounded and at peace is to deal with those initial feelings of taking care of oneself while someone else is having a reaction, of trusting yourself to manage a situation if another person's reaction comes at you or causes something in your field that you now have to deal with, that you have the competency within inside of yourself to deal with it. And I think that just takes time to cultivate that self-trust, because we've been working so hard to fix things outside of ourselves that we've lacked the skill set to be with the things that are inside of ourselves.
Do you think it's harder now? I mean, perhaps when we started dating, I don't know, we met somebody in a bar, maybe met somebody at work, met somebody through a friend of a friend. But a lot of people now meet people digitally via an app or in different ways. And do you think it's harder now to that's probably the wrong way of phrasing it, but do you find it harder now to choose the right partner?
Certainly. I mean, it feels like that is what the cultural zeitgeist is saying. Everybody is saying it's harder to choose. So it's tricky, because if everyone's saying it, it ends up making it even more true, right? Like everyone keeps
Yeah. Self-fulfilling, isn't it?
yeah. So I don't want to contribute to that. What I can say is that certainly from the standpoint of people pleasers, there's a tendency to really focus on chemistry and having chemistry with somebody. And chemistry is something that tends to happen quickly. It happens fast and it feels intense, and it usually feels really good. The challenge is just because you have chemistry with someone doesn't mean that they have the capacity to be in a relationship with you, right? And that, because there's such an attachment to chemistry, there can be a tendency to rush in and become deeply attached based on chemistry alone. And so then when the person shows up in a way that shows they lack capacity, that's when the people pleasing kicks in, because all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, I'll do all that work. I'll take care of all of that. This person, or they're trying to pull it out of somebody who doesn't have it to give. And so now the relationship is built on that, on trying to like squeeze capacity out of somebody who doesn't have it, or trying to hold all of the relational capacity for everybody. And then it gets played out that way. And it's all because the attachment happened so strong in that chemistry. But
Yeah.
capacity is revealed in moments of tension.
Mhm.
How is tension handled? How are those differences navigated? How do they talk to me when things aren't going the way that they want them to? What's happening there? Like, so those moments of tension are required, but moments of tension feel threatening to chemistry. And so there'll be a real tendency to want to avoid moments of tension. And so there's more people pleasing, trying to avoid moments of tension in order to keep the chemistry alive. And so then we prevent the revealing of someone's capacity for a really long time. Right? So really I would say, just in terms of the dating world, is like, it takes time to really understand whether someone has a capacity to be in a relationship in a healthy way with you. And so uh, I would just encourage who's ever out there looking for whoever. I'm not going to say it's hard or not, but I would say to invest in knowing someone's capacity. Enjoy the chemistry, but understand you have chemistry with a lot of people. Right? This idea of the one is very silly. You have chemistry with a lot of people, but that does not equate to whether you can have a relationship long term with them or not. I didn't really answer your question, but I didn't want to answer your question.
No. You answered it beautifully. It's funny, isn't it? 'Cause I think I think everybody listening, and you and I are probably the same. We can all think back to different relationships that we've had, and whether or not it was literally a holiday romance, but we've met somebody, we've hooked up, we've had the most amazing sex for sort of 10 days. Wow, it was incredible, literally swinging from the chandeliers and whatever else. But that's never going to be a relationship. And we know in our heart it's never going to be a relationship. It's the same when you go on holiday and you have this amazing cocktail. When you get back to home and it's like, you taste it, that's horrible. It's
Right.
just something for that moment. I think if you can accept that was an incredibly pleasurable experience,
Yeah.
and I can move on to the next thing and look for that capacity thing, really.
Yeah.
So you sort of said that obviously there's 8 billion people on the planet. Thinking that there's only one person there for each of us is quite random, really. So where do you sit on ethical non-monogamy and polyamorous relationships?
I mean, I I don't know. I think, where do I sit with it? It's up to each individual. I don't take a position on it. I think monogamy works really well for some people. I think polyamory can work really well for other people. I think polyamory is very complex and very complicated. I don't think that means it can't be done, but I think that it just is complicated. But let's be real, monogamy is pretty complicated too. So it's just a different kind of complication. So I think it's up to each individual. I think the fact that we are, we're not monogamous in the sense that we're with one person the rest of our lives. It's very rare to find that anymore. Usually we're serial monogamists, right? We
Mhm.
might be with a single person. And so, it's so tricky because some people, they do great being together their whole lives, right? And it works. And so I don't think there is a one answer. I think some people, everyone's changing and evolving, and maybe you get to a place where you change and evolve where this relationship just doesn't make sense anymore. In which case, I think the most loving thing to do would be to let each other go rather than try and fight for it to be what it once was, right?
Yeah.
But that letting go can be extremely painful because it means letting go of the hopes and the dreams. But like the football player you talked about, none of those were failed. Those
No.
relationships were successful in a million ways, even though they didn't last forever, right?
Yeah.
um, and so I do believe that is true, that you never know if someone's meant to be there forever or for a season. Only a couple and an individual could ever know that to be true. But I do think that it is probably healthier to make space for that to be true than to try and hold on tight to some idea that you had 20 years ago.
Yeah. It's really interesting when I talk to people that are in polyamorous relationships. One of the things they always say is it's logistically it's really hard.
Right,
It's
right.
like, who do I spend Thanksgiving with? Who do I spend Christmas with? What happens with the
Sure.
finances? It's everything that's it's just amazing how
Yeah.
sex with lots of people. It really is very common. Are both of you? Is it just one person? Is it two? It becomes a very sort of complex.
Yes.
But to be fair, it's probably only been 300 or 400 years that we've been monogamous. Before that, I mean, the whole saying of it takes a village to raise a child was because typically in a village, you didn't know who the father was, because the woman's job was to procreate and to have the healthiest sperm, and that's what it was really. Whereas now it becomes a lot more complicated. And I do think exactly you were saying for the last hour really, is that expecting to get everything and every need met by one person is it's just not realistic. So whether that be the person you go on a bike ride with as a friend, the person you go to wine club with, the person whatever, you're going to have different people for different parts of your life. But we almost sometimes in a relationship feel we need to get or give everything to this other person. Otherwise it's not a proper, we're not in a real relationship. And everyone has a friends, we do everything together. Well, but that isn't necessarily a good thing. I mean, I think we've been programmed by the media, by society, by religion to think we've got A plus B equals C, and those two people do everything together. Otherwise, it's not a good relationship.
Sure. Well, I mean, again, I think for some people doing everything together works for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm not going to judge that, but I think you're also right to put pressure on a couple to meet each other's every need is very unrealistic. And you're right. We used to live in villages, and the truth is back then women spent more time with other women than they did around one man. Right.
Yeah.
And so really there was a getting filled by multiple sources, and it's not all about romance, right? It's about connection and feeling and a level of intimacy that doesn't require physicality. And so I think we have lost that in becoming these sort of nuclear, families, and becoming as isolated as we've become. We've pressurized relationships to be everything because contact is lost around. There isn't the feeling of a village anymore. That does seem to be a lot harder to cultivate now, right? That's I'm not particularly religious, but one of the beautiful things about religion is that they have church, right? And so there's a village, there's a community around that. And, a lot of people who aren't religious don't have that. They don't have a central meeting point or a central idea or central anything to make those points of connection. And so I think it can lead to isolation, which then leads to pressurizing that one relationship to be everything.
What does your spiritual self look like now? You said you're not necessarily very religious, but religion and spirituality are very different things. What is your spiritual being at the moment?
My spiritual being, when I am most in touch with that aspect of myself, I feel a great sense of connection almost to everything. I just feel connected. That's the only way I know how to describe it. And so when I'm in that state, it's not that I don't have needs. It's just that they're not at the forefront. I feel full in that sense of connection. And so it feels like I can show up more as I am. And so anything that I would call a need isn't so much a need as it's information about my unique self and how I work, right? This is in what I used to call a need. I would say from that spiritual perspective, it just feels like, hey, my unique makeup works this way. That's it. And when I hold it that way, like when it's a need, it feels like there's a desperation for somebody else to fill it up, right? There's a thing that needs, whereas if this is just how I work, then people can meet me there or not meet me there. But because it's how I work, I'm going to spend time in spaces where that's working naturally. So my spiritual self is a place where I feel deeply connected in general to all things. And for me, I think there is just some sort of grand intelligence, whatever you want to call it. And I don't even personify it as a being person. It's just an energy field of some sort. And I do think a lot of the religions have pointed to that, even if they've gotten kind of lost in all the dogma. But I do think that there is this one energy that is I mean, all I have to think about is a human and how a human is made. And I don't mean the sex act. I mean the cells dividing. And I mean, that the level of intelligence that is required for that to happen just blows my mind. How can I not think that intelligence isn't also working in my own life?
No, I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah.
It's interesting. One of the words you used there was connected, and I have a real, I have a real feeling that we have this amazing ability to connect with pretty much anybody in the world. You're in San Diego, I'm in London, we're talking, I can see you, it's lovely, we're having a great conversation. So on one hand, we have the ability to connect with people everywhere, but at the same time, it feels in lots of ways that we're perhaps more disconnected
Oh,
than ever
yeah.
before. We know in the UK, I think the US, there's like a loneliness epidemic. People are single person households, spending more time alone. And I wondered if, is that something you sense, that you feel that sort of disconnection sometimes? Not necessarily for yourself, but in general in society.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Because, so part of my feeling that we are this connected energy thing is a part of us and all of us, is that there is something about physical presence. Right.
Yeah.
So you and I are having this conversation right now. And I feel connected to you. I feel like we're having this great conversation. There's a good flow between us, but it would feel different if we were sitting in,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
right? Like we would be in resonance with each other in a very
Mhm.
different way than we can be on the screen. So this I feel connected to you in this moment, but the connection that's possible in person is different because we are energy, right? And so the
Yeah.
thing that we're missing when we're on a screen is that sort of energy exchange that happens when you're actually in someone's energetic field, right? And
Yeah.
only so much
Yeah.
of that can come across a screen. And
Mhm.
so being around other humans, that narrows our proximity to connection. So instead of reaching out to the whole world, which is possible, but at a very almost like shallow level, what I think is missing is the connection that's deeper, that's available in real life, real life presence with another human being. So
Mhm.
I do think that there is an epidemic of loneliness because everybody's getting used to the surface level connection that can happen here, but then there's this deeper existential loneliness that is at the root of that loneliness epidemic that can only be healed being in the presence of other people, right? Being seen, touching the shoulder, giving a hug, looking in someone's face in real life, right? That level of connection, it's you have to seek it. You have to put yourself out there. Again, if you're not in a church, I don't know where else you're going to find it. And you have to actively go seek that out. And whether people do that or not, or where do you find them? I for the longest time felt that and knew that. And I just recently, there's a community that's formed here in San Diego, and it's considered a networking community, but it's about connection first, and it's about relationship first. So everybody's supporting each other business wise, but it's all built on first connecting one-on-one with another human being. And it's wild. This thing started 3 years ago, and they're already at 8,100 people in this
Wow. I love
connection.
that.
And there's all these events you can go to meet up, and you can't connect with 8,100 people, but you can show up at an event and connect with
Yeah.
the 20 people that are there, or the 2 people sitting next to you, right? Like it allows for that physical presence. And so I just started being a part of that recently. And I love it. I love that part of it, but I don't think that's always so easy to find these days.
No. And I think a lot of people, but even people that go to therapy, even some therapists, they're very much focused on, this is going to sound silly, the sort of the neck up. They
Mm,
focus on this bit. And I've always been the sort of person I can really, really feel and
oh,
carry emotions in my gut always. And I can
yeah,
almost describe the shape, the form, and I wondered, I know with your yoga philosophy, obviously you're incredibly in tune with your body, but I wondered how important the whole almost somatic release that we need to do sometimes is. And we can't just tune our brains, fix our brains, whatever. We have to sort of somehow recognize where the emotion, because they say the body keeps a score. And I
yeah,
think when it really does, I think there's so many things that I can wake up in the morning, I can feel the tension in my shoulders, I can feel the negativity in my gut. And it's not in my head, it's a physical manifestation. And I
sure.
wonder how important the whole mental and physical aspects are to you.
It's everything. It's essential because you're right. This is the place, in fact, this is the place where so many people go to deal with what's happening here.
Yeah.
Right. And so I have a sensation and I jump up here to tell the story way, to explain it, to justify it. Right. So it's sort of like, and it's a quick thing that happens, but
Yeah.
the experience is going down here. Right. Like that's what's happening. So a big part of the work that I do for myself and with other people's is learning how to be with. Right. It's real, because when I say, I'll tell clients, I'll say like, where do you feel that in your body? And they're like, oh, I've tightening my chest. Awesome. Let's just go sit with and be with the tightening in your chest. And they're like, well, what am I supposed to do with it? Nothing. Just be with it. Right. Like, what if it's not a problem to solve? What if it's something that you're just supposed to learn how to be with and sit with? Right. The same way that if, my son cut his hand, I can put a Band-Aid on and put cream on, but I can't actually solve it. I can't make the wound heal or even make the wound stop hurting. All I can do is sit with him while it hurts. And that makes a huge difference to the experience that he's having. It doesn't mean that the cut didn't happen. It just means that he's now not alone in it. And it's the same thing for us and our emotions. We leave ourselves alone a lot by going up and trying to solve the problem. So then we just leave the emotion alone. And all it needs is really to be felt, to be acknowledged, right? To be witnessed. And so if we go and sit with it, again, it doesn't mean it just lifts and goes away. But what happens is there's like this relief, there's a softening toward it that happens that frees us up to be able to then, when the time is right, sort of act in the situation at hand. But then we're not acting trying to get rid of a feeling. We're acting from like a greater sense of wisdom once that feeling's been integrated. Because I think our feelings have information for us.
Oh, definitely.
I think they're telling us something. So if we don't
Yeah.
spend time with them, how are we going to get the information that they're trying to give us? Right.
Mm. So how do you nourish your mental and physical well-being? Because a lot of time, couples obviously aren't generally coming to you to say, hey, I just wanted to pop in and tell you how wonderful things are.
Yeah.
They're coming to you, and I'm sure sometimes there's some heavy trauma, there's some real difficulties, so it can be a space where where it can feel quite dark, I guess. So how do you nourish your mental and physical well-being to be the best version of yourself?
You mean like from working with clients that are going through heavy things?
Yeah, so when you step out of that and you're sort of the day's finished or it's your weekend or whatever, you also don't want to carry that negativity or trauma with you, but you want to then be ready for the next day or ready for your partner, ready for your family. So how do you nourish yourself?
There's a few things you said in that, and I hope I can get to all of them. So I want to
There was
start
a
with,
lot, sorry.
no, it's
I must
okay.
get better at shorter questions.
No, you did great. There were just a few things that I was like, ooh, I want to say something on that too. So the first thing you said is, people don't show up and tell me how great everything is. I work with people on a regular basis. So we try and have an appointment like every 2 weeks. So there are times where they show up and everything is great. And those appointments are just as valuable. Sometimes in the beginning of with me, they'll show up and be like, God, I was going to cancel today because everything's great. I don't have anything to talk about. And I was like, are you kidding me? Let's talk about how great things are and why they're so great. And can we revel in that? And can we figure out, how did you get, like last time I talked to you, you were in a dark place. How did you get here? Tell me about that. And so really it's really helpful, not just to spend time with people and everything that's hard, but to actually let them sort of revel in the way things are good and how they got themselves there and what happened, because that's just as valuable, is kind of digging into all the dark pieces. People, as far as my work with people, first of all, I am a coach. I'm not a therapist. So if somebody has heavy trauma, I would refer them out, because that is not for me to deal with. That doesn't mean people don't bring me heavy things though, that are hard for them. And people always ask me, like, how do I do that, sitting day in and day out? The truth is, the only thing that exhausts me in my job is sitting across from a screen. Being with people, I am in such a state of just loving them. I just love them. I get to sit across from people and just adore them and love them and root for them and support them. I don't feel empty when I get done. I mean, if I have, my fullest day usually is 5 to 6 people. And again, the only thing that makes me tired is having sat on a screen that long. Being with the people, like I look at my calendar and like, oh, I get to talk to this person today and that person
Nice.
today, and I can't wait to hear how they're dealing with this, and I wonder how that went with them. And it just is, there's so much of that that I don't walk away feeling the heaviness of anything, because I just get to be with somebody in their life. I'm not responsible for their life at all. And so I just get to witness it, and I get to just cheer them on in it. So yeah, I don't have that issue.
So you've been very generous with your time. So my final question is going to be.
Oh my gosh, are we there already? Wow.
Yeah, we can keep talking, but no, I don't want to take your whole day. But yeah, I'd be interested to know how you answer this. So do you have a vision for what the future holds for you? Or are you very much, it'll unfold as it unfolds?
I am very excited about my future. I feel like at 50 years old, I feel like I am coming into my own in a new way. And I might be I know I'm feeling good right now, but I also I can see that there's something even bigger coming for me right now. And so all I know is that I'm excited, and I can't tell you necessarily what it is other than just more of me being with me. There's just a bigger expression of me that's unfolding right now. And so that feels really good and exciting. And so having conversations with people like you is a big part of that. I feel so delighted to get to sit with someone and explore these questions together. And so I really appreciate you being a part of that part of me that's unfolding right now. So thank you.
No, it was my absolute pleasure. Actually, that's a lie. There's one more final question. So when were you first comfortable saying that you really loved yourself?
Gosh. Well, I think I would say it before, but I didn't really do it to the
Yep.
fullest extent. I think it's been a process for me, honestly. I don't
Mhm.
think it was like a grand moment. I think it was sort of like a moment of choosing to go for the run instead of having the drink. And I did it not because it was the right thing to do, but I was doing
Yeah.
it genuinely because I was like, you know what, what I need right now, I'm going to give myself what I need. And it was like a lot of moments like that, right? So I think it was built in moments of
Mhm.
demonstrating care for myself over and over and over again. And as those moments built, I just felt like someone worth caring for more. And so, of course, they just feed on top of each other. So I don't think there was a moment. I think it's been building for a really long time. And I'm feeling pretty good right now. So I'm excited to see where that is going to continue to grow and expand.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'll watch with interest. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. It's really interesting when somebody's had the experiences you've had from a sort of teenage life and being the sort of mediator at home and playing that role, and then coming out into life and going through your own people pleasing tendencies, coming out the other side, helping couples individually and together. And I really like the whole individual and together thing. It feels so much more powerful.
Yeah.
No, it was a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your time.